Hello, Mayor Wu.
Hello.
How are you? Nice to see you.
Sorry I'm late.
Boy.
I'm hiking over in the snow.
I am impressed. Somebody from your staff just called and said she's going to be here at 11:15 because the snow is bad, and it is exactly 11:15.
Very
That's
impressive.
very impressive.
We try to be on time
Yeah,
late, too.
usually you say 11:15, it's 11:20, it's 11:25. So thank you very much, Mayor Wu, for accurately predicting when you were
great
going to
team.
show up here this
Do
morning.
you mind
Thank
if I ask you, is it a transfer? I don't mean to, what is a transportation issue for you this morning?
It was a number of things, but I was coming from our cabinet meeting. We didn't leave enough time to leave.
But it's not because you couldn't get through the streets or that kind of thing.
No. Everything was
okay.
moving slower. And, yeah, I think the T's shut down for a little bit, too.
Poor T.
Well, I was going to say, so you didn't take the T.
No.
Was there a fire in downtown Crossing?
Electrical issue.
Electrical issues. Okay.
When you hear that, wait, I'm sorry. When you hear that, she's smiling if you're not watching on YouTube or if you're not here. When you hear that, by the way, we've praised Philip Ang. Our initial impressions of him
The best.
are all good.
Yeah, he's great.
And he's transparent. He's all this stuff. But when you hear those kinds of things on such a regular basis, what's in your head?
It's almost like just say, we couldn't get it together, guys. Like,
I know. It's like,
Wow.
electrical. I don't know. I think it is the 2023 Person of the Year are MBTA commuters.
that's right. They are long-suffering, and they persevere. Henry Santoro just announced that there was another problem on the T, and then he says, surprise, surprise, another problem on the MBTA.
We're getting there, though. I'm very confident in the general manager, and we're making great progress.
Yeah. So, Mayor, you gave the State of the City address just recently. Tell people what the high points were. What did you mostly focus on?
You know, it's, I'll just share here, it's quite an intense experience. One, there's no other venue where I am talking for 30 minutes straight anywhere. I do a lot of talking, but that in and of itself is an experience. And it's the only time in the year where we get that basically in uninterrupted time directly through all the TV stations, generously covering it, and news coverage, just the chance to maximize our odds of connecting with residents about a big picture context more than just one soundbite here or there. And so we take it very seriously. And in our administration, we try to use it as a way to really be clear about why we've been doing what we've been doing, what we have accomplished so far, and what's going to happen in the year ahead. I've been in a lot of these events, and often there's big pronouncements that rely on very unpredictable things or, more big picture wishes rather than specific commitments and goals. And we, sometimes I'll get the feedback, why didn't you make any gigantic announcement about moving City Hall to the Seaport or wherever it is? We want to be very honest with residents. This is what we're doing, and this is what the next year will entail. And so it takes a lot of time, months within the administration of organizing what the policy plans are, how all that fits together. Every single sentence in there is tied to at least one, if not multiple, departments' specific work, vetting it and planning it and being able to follow through on that. So it's a great opportunity. This year, I talked about the idea of Boston being a home for everyone, not just having a house, but the entire experience of what it means to feel at home in every part of our city and to really include every community member in that.
By the way, you couldn't move City Hall to Seaport because they'd have to put it on pontoons, which obviously is going to be very difficult. Before we get to the calls, the lines are full already. The number's 877-301-8970. If you're at the library, if you brave the weather, which is really not that bad for those who were nervous about coming, Hannah, our colleague, is right over there. If you can raise your hand, Hannah. And if you fill out a card, there's a good chance you get to talk to the mayor directly. I want to talk about one other speech. We were on the air, we're almost on the air, when you spoke yesterday at the Martin Luther King breakfast. And I want to ask you your opinion a year after the dedication of the Embrace, how we're doing in the city on racial equity issues. But before we do that, there's one part of your speech which was pretty intense. I thought you were addressing something I think we talked to you about last month, the criticism you took all over the place for this Christmas party of electeds of color. And here's part of what the mayor said yesterday at the Martin Luther King breakfast.
I am tired of those fearmongers and mob baiters who fan the flames and call for unity. Viral outrage ricocheted internationally as those who had never before cared about representation railed against this as exclusionary.
Could you expand on what you were thinking and saying yesterday a little bit, Mayor Wu?
Yeah, it cut out one part right in the middle of there, which maybe they or trying to make me seem less controversial. But I was sharing this sentiment that in this moment, this is broader than government and politics. It's connected to what we see happening in universities and academia, but it's connected to lots of examples all across the business sector and in people's daily lives where there is a push to say the way to not be divisive is in fact to never talk about race, to never bring up programs that should be specifically trying to address disparities, and essentially to pretend that any mention of racial inequities is dividing people further. And so I had said in the middle of those two chunks of statements that there is this call to say you need to unite us, but when they say don't divide us, it really means don't defy us, right? We want to keep things how they were. We want to continue upholding structures that haven't been working for our community at large. And we've seen this play out in situation after situation, and it's reflected around the country in some cases much more than in Boston around what books people are allowed to read, what curriculum can be used, the portrayal of certain moments in our history in a very distorted way. And we feel that here locally as well. And so my charge to the room was, as we think about the legacy of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., it is a commitment not just to peace and justice in a warm, fuzzy way of we're moving beyond differences between people, but action to specifically address what needs to be done, and that still requires a lot of work.
Can we talk about one specific, and then we promise we'll get to the calls at 877-301-8970. During the NAACP convention, we were broadcasting live from there. We met Rose Starum from Rosemark Productions, and she does events, and Ricardo Pierre-Louis, who did privé parking. And they got really significant contracts there. Rose was talking about the fact she's done things for presidents of the United States, but had never had a major contract
Rose was just
in
here
Boston before.
She was just the main organizer when Secretary Yellen came into town.
Oh, when she went to RCC?
Event, yeah.
Well, that's interesting to hear, because we asked, and we had them back last week, because they were very excited and benefited from what the NAACP of Boston and you decided in terms of contracting during the NAACP. And we had them back and said, is the city and are the promises being realized? And here's a little bit of what Rose had to say. She said she was hired by the Black Economic Council of Massachusetts for a successful 2-day event, but she went on to say this.
But they are a Black owned business. So Rosemark has yet to be contracted again in Boston by a non-Black owned business, which is a little disappointing, but we're striving forward.
And Ricardo said that he is, and by the way, they both praised you, I should say, and they praised you. And Ricardo said his company is in line for a parking contract that the BPTA is bidding out, and he said historically a publicly traded company from California has gotten it. He hopes he gets it this time. How do you think you are doing in terms of follow-up to commitments at the NAACP?
We are tracking very carefully in terms of the numbers. We're at 12% as of the last count of the proportion of contracting dollars that are going to what are called MBEs, minority business enterprises, the technical term, businesses owned by people of color. That number historically has been under 1% for decades and decades. When then Councilor Presley and I first wrote the ordinance to even start getting the city to measure this, it came back as 0.65% was the first report. I think that must have been in 2016 or 17. And it's been under 1% since we got into office. It was boosted to 5% in our first year, 12% over this last year, and we have set a clear goal of surpassing 25%. That is the minimum that we need to be doing. But it's more than, oftentimes when you talk about what's going to happen over the next year or what the goals are for the city, it's easy to say 25%, let's do it, and then things don't change. There are very specific steps that have been taken. So to get from less than 1% to 5% to 12%, we created, for the first time, a buying plan for the city to ask departments to be clear based on what their previous multi-year contracts have been, what are the contracts that are upcoming so that the potential bidders can prepare rather than just checking the portal every day and seeing what ends up getting posted as a bidding opportunity. We created a sheltered markets program through an ordinance at the City Council that identifies specific places where the bidders are targeted to Black and brown businesses or businesses that represent the type of disparity that's reflected in the contracting dollars relative to the availability of businesses in the community according to the legal standards. We also worked with the state legislature to raise the thresholds where the city can issue contracts that aren't as bound by the many long time periods subject to 30B procurement law that allows us to be more intentional with how we issue those contracts through written quotes and who we invite to bid on those contracts. And so it's been a lot of work along the way. We have more work to do in terms of continuing to break down the school contracts that are going out, the housing, affordable housing contracts that are going out. Every component, we're trying to not just make an opportunity available, but directly communicate with the potential bidders, create training programs, create incentive structures. When we announced our Welcome Home Boston program, which is 150 vacant lots that will be developed into smaller multifamily affordable housing, we sat with a coalition of developers of color to say, how do we take down barriers so that you all will be in the best possible position to bid on these parcels? And they raised the issue, for example, of pre-development costs. Even before you buy the materials, you have to pay the architect, you have to survey this land, get the lawyers, and that can add up. And so we've now taken that feedback and created a fund to help offset pre-development costs for some of those bidders as well. So every time we can identify one more barrier to take down, we are taking that opportunity and trying to connect that with every possible city dollar that's going out the door. One other program that has been really innovative under the leadership of Chief Sugun Idawu of our Economic Opportunity and Inclusion Cabinet is our SCALE program. So this is federal recovery dollars that are specifically going to build capacity for our local companies to bid on contracts, to have the capacity to bid on larger contracts. And we know this goes right back into our community because in addition to the percentage of MBE dollars that has doubled, we've also doubled the percentage of dollars going to Boston-based businesses headquartered here in the city.
Fair enough. That's the mayor of the city of Boston. She's with us until noon.
Adam from Boston, thank you for calling.
Hello, Adam.
Yes, hi, Jim. Hi, Margery. Good morning, Mayor Wu. How are you?
Great.
Just wanted to ask about the orange line, red line thing this morning. What's the plan for the MBTA to keep this from happening again? I mean, the green line is closed today for construction, the red line and the orange line for busing. It's getting better now, I know, but it's getting to be the point where it's unacceptable. And I'd like to know if the MBTA, maybe you encourage them to hold an emergency board meeting on this issue tomorrow. I mean, thousands of people were inconvenienced today. So I guess my question is, what's the reaction and what can the T do? And also, hopefully, Jim and Margie will have Philip hang on again. That was awesome. So thank you again, Mayor Wu.
Thank you.
Thank you, Adam.
Yeah, I'm so sorry to the many people who are affected on a daily basis, trying to get where they need to go to contribute to the city, to get to work, to pick up their kids. And the transportation system is a barrier rather than a mechanism to help connect all the pieces of your lives. We, at the city level, are working very closely with the MBTA to support as rapid a transformation as possible. There are costs to delaying decisions, and what the T and General Manager Eng and the Governor's administration are dealing with now really is a compounded effect of many decades. And I truly believe that they have done more in 8 months of his leadership than was moved forward in years before that. And so it will get worse before it gets better in terms of some of the shutdowns that might be required or just the scope of fixes to actually solve the problem. But I believe that we've turned a corner with the MBTA taking on a mindset rather than just trying to stretch out the pain or paper over it here and there, to actually address head-on what's needed, even if that means short-term pain and inconvenience, that in the long run and hopefully sooner than later, we will be in a place where we're experiencing improvements. I know on the red line, for example, the shutdown that happened several months ago did lead to significantly improved times. We need to get to the point where it's not just trains being able to move faster on those same tracks, but greater frequency and shorter wait time in between trains coming. I think that's the headways are really how affect people's decisions to take the T or not. We now have a seat on the MBTA board and are working very closely with them. And I'm planning to be much more, the team said I wasn't allowed to make the full, anyway, I am going to be.
Whoa. What was the end of that sentence?
I'm trying not to advertise this too widely, but it's really important how we get around. And so as we think about how I experience the city and my opportunity to be in community with people, to hold office hours, we're going to try to tack that on to transportation and commuting to work, and make sure that I'm helping give voice to what still needs to be done.
Do you talk to Aang regularly?
Yes.
You do? Okay.
Yeah, he's a very impressive guy, so we're very hopeful. You know, Mayor, the Globe has done a lot of great reporting about problems with kids learning to read all around the Commonwealth. They just had a story that said 40% of kids who took the 10th grade MCAS in English did not meet proficiency benchmarks. And they pointed out the MCAS is the only way they find out if kids are having these terrible problems. But they focused in on a couple of kids in Boston. But the big thing I wanted to ask you about was apparently Boston's going to have this major literacy overhaul, and they're going to have reading skills 3 times a year screened. But they're changing, I think, to a new way of teaching reading, because apparently all around the Commonwealth, in which districts too, they've been teaching reading the wrong way, and kids haven't been able to learn to read. So what's going on?
Yeah, this has been one of the superintendent's major priorities, and the implementation is well underway now. I think we are solidly in the 1.5 second year of implementing what's called equitable literacy in the district. And the idea is that reading is fundamental to everything. It's, of course, at the most the basic level, it's about being able to process how letters fit together and phonics and then words to sentences. But you can't be successful at processing the information to do math at a certain level, or to understand your history classes, or any other subject, unless that reading comprehension is really solid as the foundation for everything else. And so we are focusing on equitable literacy.
Is this phonics?
It's grounded in, it's more above my pay grade in terms of understanding the educational philosophies, but the way that it's been boiled down that I try to share is it's grounded in really a neuroscience, what they call the science of reading approach to how to build up a young person into being able to read and process information and comprehend at the earliest ages. Okay. And then at the kind of more advanced levels, it's really taking a look at the materials that are being used, the type of text, the language, the kind of entry points into that. And there's been an overhaul of the curriculum and materials as well, so that what our students are reading is much more reflective of their personal experiences, their cultures, their identities than traditionally has been used in some of these old school reading materials. And the way that BPS has approached this is we haven't had a unified cohesive academic vision for some time. This is the place where across every school, every grade, equitable literacy has been the unifying force. It's shared professional development, it's shared understanding. The regional network that BPS has in supporting groups of schools by geographic area has layered in literacy coaches and coaching, not just for the young people who might need extra supports, but for educators as well, to get real-time feedback on how it's going. And we've gotten really great response from the educators saying this has been very helpful, consistent, and really impactful in being able to see the results.
I just want to be clear, this is moving away from the so-called low-quality reading methods that Jeff Riley, the Commissioner of Education, has complained about, to a more what they call phonics-based, sounding out words way of learning to read.
Yeah, Boston's a little bit ahead of the curve because we began this a number of years ago, and we're well into implementation now.
Let's take one more call before the break. Paula in Somerville, you're next with Mayor Wu of Boston. Hi, Paula. Paula?
Hello?
Hi, you're on. Shoot.
Hello. Oh, hi. Hi, Mayor Wu.
Hello.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So it is abundantly clear that we are witnessing a genocide of the Palestinian people. 24,000 people are dead, and the numbers are continuing to rise. Yesterday, I watched a video of a Palestinian doctor having to amputate his own daughter's leg. These acts of violence are being supported by the United States and by Boston, who gives over $10 million a year to fund the Israeli military. I've been among the thousands of people marching weekly, Jewish, Muslim, people of all backgrounds, calling for the genocide to finally end. With thousands dead, thousands and thousands of men, women, children, why have you, Senator Ed Markey, Warren, all of these representatives who are supposed to represent us, why have they been silent on calling for a ceasefire and provision of humanitarian aid to Gaza?
Thank you, Paulo.
We feel the hurt so deeply in our local community as well. It's just unfathomable to imagine, even at a very high level, so far away from the conflict, what it means to lose so many tens of thousands of lives, two-thirds women and children, people who are just trying to survive and take care of their families. In Boston, we are looking to ensure that we're creating safety for everyone here. That is my primary focus, to support our federal delegation as they take the positions and actions that they were elected to do, and then on the ground to ensure that the corresponding impacts from this, the rise of Islamophobia and anti-Semitism and the interconnections with a much more visible presence of hate and violence everywhere in our country, that we can be a city where all voices are heard and that everyone can be in community with each other.
Before we take a break, Senator Warren has actually joined Bernie Sanders in saying that funding for Israel should have conditions attached, which it hasn't in the past. Do you share her perspective?
I don't know enough, to be totally honest. I like to weigh in on things where I feel confident in my knowledge and my expertise. My knowledge and expertise is in the city of Boston, and so I support our federal delegation in the work that they're doing to try to make sure they're advocating for what is best.
You know, Mayor Wu, before we go, I'm getting several checks rather. I wasn't aware of this, but several people are saying that police officers in Boston are trained by the Israeli military, and people are upset about that and wondering why. I was not aware of this. Are you aware of this?
I talked to Commissioner Cox about this just to understand, because I've heard this bubble up in a couple different spaces. It seems that I think what people are referring to is that there have in the past been exchange programs between the Israeli army and different leadership roles within police departments around the world. Boston has not participated in this in some time, and we have not been participating.
So these people are incorrect. They're texting about this.
If this is the program they're talking about, which I believe the commissioner, my
Boston
understanding
police officers receiving military training from the Israeli military forces.
We have not taken part in that anytime recently.
Okay.
We continue to be joined by the mayor of the city of Boston, Michelle Wu, who has always bearing gifts. You want to tell us what you brought?
Okay, show and tell this month is from a small business that I highlighted in the State of the City called Flourish and Foundry. They are one of our 20-some space grant recipients. In that program, the acronym SPACE, it was supporting pandemic-affected commercial enterprises. And the idea was that with so many vacancies, we have to not only matchmake between entrepreneurs in those spaces, but help support the build-out and some of the other costs that go into even making that possible. And so we had a great crop of businesses moving into much-needed downtown and other high-traffic retail spaces to fill. This one is on Tremont Street, right by Downtown Crossing, and they are a home goods store that really represents all of the exciting work and talent and ideas in our community.
Say the name one more time, if you would.
Flourish and Foundry.
Flourish
and
and
I have a
Foundry.
beautiful, beautiful candle that smells absolutely wonderful.
Check
Very
them out.
kind.
Yes, ethically
Thank you so
sourced,
much.
low impact, etc.
877-301-8970 is the number if you want to call Mayor Wu for the next 16 and a half minutes. Kip and Dedham, you're on with the mayor. Hey.
Hello, Mayor Wu. How are you?
Great. How are you?
Good. I live on the in Eagan Parkway, right on the Dedham-Boston line, and it, of course, goes through Hyde Park, Boston, West Roxbury. the trash is absolutely terrible and disgusting. And there are no barrels, no signs, there is no cameras, there's no deterrent. And I've done my Mike Dukakis imitation and gone down to DCR with my own bag of trash, and they said simply that, there's plenty of chiefs, but there's no Indians. There's no people to work. And they've got 300,000 acres. And never bring up a problem without a solution, but, we've got migrants in a lot of these local hotels that would, I'm sure, like to work and make some money. It's not terrible work.
What's your question? Hey, Kip, Good. What's your question?
My question is, how are we going to solve this problem? Is there any solution to help the DCR with this?
Yeah, thank you for raising this, and thank you for thank you for taking matters into your own hands. Just be careful. It's a challenge. The spaces that you're talking about out there, I know exactly which spaces, and they are state owned and therefore state maintained. I can check in with the team to see what kind of arrangements we have, but we understand at the city level, and all my colleagues in elected office know that when a constituent calls about an issue, they don't care who it is who's actually the one that needs to fix it, whether it's the city council or mayor's office or state legislature or state administration. We want to get it done. And so we've actually been working to try to cross some of those boundaries that are, city does this, state does that. On snow removal, for example, technically the city is not supposed to clear snow from the state-owned roadways in the city. And we would always have this patchwork afterwards where we would do our thing. The state has a lot of ground to cover, and sometimes they would do their thing at different times, or we'd push it onto their side, they'd push it back over to ours. And so we actually coordinated and now have a list of, Ukraine Way, for example, in some of these little spaces where there's a jurisdictional issue. We have not done it as proactively on the parks and open space side, so I will definitely bring this up, and I really am grateful for Commissioner Arrigo, who is in charge of DCR now. He's a former mayor, totally gets it on these basic bread and butter issues, so I will raise it and see what we can do out there.
Kip, thanks for the call. Have you seen the inflated clowns?
I haven't gotten to in person yet. I can't wait.
How great it's great, isn't it? There's all this public art stuff is just terrific.
It goes along, at the State of the City, I was describing how home means feeling like you belong, but home also includes feeling wonder and joy and sparking your imagination, and public art is a huge piece of that. It also helps get people back downtown, helps our small businesses. It all fits together. And it's some of what we're trying to do as well with the announcement we made about the 6 incredible cultural institutions, from the art museums to the aquarium and the zoo and the children's museum, the science museum, who are coming together for the first time across all of their institutions to say we're making the first and second Sundays free for all BPS students and their families. And the idea, again, is to get you to look around, enjoy, tap into something deep inside you, and whether that's public art or inside our institutions, it's really important to make it accessible.
Was that the issue where they started applauding before you even said it because they had the transcript?
Yeah.
Was that what it was? Yeah. It was. That's great.
Yeah, but you spoke about how much this mattered to you when you were a kid growing up. Tell me what you said about that.
Yeah, I shared that, and we had done 2 or 3 read-throughs of the speech before. I had not been able to get through that part without bawling through the practice. That was the first time I managed to do it, kind of holding it together. But it was a really emotional story for me, talking about how my mom used to tell me all growing up about how before I was old enough to remember, she figured out that the Art Institute of Chicago had free Tuesdays. And so she would take me and spend the whole day there before she could speak English, before she had any sense of stability or any way to afford experience like that otherwise. And she would tell me constantly about it, sometimes in a kind of, you know how much I did for you? I figured out how to haul you downtown. And then sometimes it was in a way to remind me of how much was inside me that they had poured into me that I didn't even know yet, how important it was, and just to remember that they had tried their best to give me the world with every resource they had, and it was so special to them, that the opportunity to be in one of the world's leading art museums, to see paintings and works of art that connect you to the kind of history of the world and your place in the scheme of things. And we have all that here in Boston, but we need to make sure that our young people and their families can get that experience too.
David and JP are on with the mayor of the city of Boston, Michelle Wu. Hey, David.
Hello, Jim. Hello, Margery. Hello,
Hi.
Mayor Wu.
Hello.
This is
Hi.
David Sandak calling from Jamaica Plain. Mayor Wu, I know you're so committed to Franklin Park. I even saw you the other day there looking at a rainbow with me over White Stadium.
Yes,
and
I
everyone
remember.
knows the reason. Everyone knows the reason why a rainbow was coming over JP the other day is that we are getting a professional women's soccer team. And it's so exciting and so grateful for your stewardship of this. However, just as the team has moved forward at a rapid pace of development, I'm calling to just encourage you and your team and Morgan to move the city's process along. While the city's put forward some answers, there are a lot of lingering questions of the impacts that will happen on the neighborhood, and the neighbors and abutters are being asked to provide their voice in regards to the Article 80 submission without the city coming forward with respect to what the impacts will be on the park, on traffic, on parking, and on the neighborhood. So I would just really encourage the city to catch up to the team to try to provide answers to some neighbors that are getting more and more anxious over time. And the last thing I would just add is that I would also encourage you and thank you for the commitment you've made to the park by investing in the action plan and bringing increased maintenance workers to the park. But I would just like to point out that we still have a long way to go to fully fund the Franklin Park Action Plan, and I would encourage the city to consider that any lease payments that are derived from the stadium would go to help provide funding towards that community-driven action plan.
David, let's get a response.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for the call. Let's get a response from
Thank
the mayor.
you. Well, first, it was fun to see you there. Now I remember exactly what the setting was, and your children are absolutely beautiful, and I'm so happy that they get the chance to spend time in the park like mine do. It's really just such a gift that we have. I had a whole long rambling section about Olmsted in the State of the City speech that had to get cut because of time, but I've been spending a lot of time carrying around the action plan, the multi-100-page document, going through all the pieces of it, and trying to make sure we are making the most of this moment, because each generation has the chance to steward the natural resources that are given that have been passed down to us from generations before, and it's our choice. Do we develop it? Do we take it and do something with it for what feels like a very urgent need in this moment, or do we give the gift of passing down that open space and nurturing it to the generation after us? There is so much that we have to do for Franklin Park, right? It is a gem. It is Olmsted's masterpiece. He designed it after designing Central Park and so many of the most well-known national parks nationally. He then came back to Boston, lived here, and this was really the culmination of his ideas and his work, and we have not maintained that park in the 100-some years since it was given to us, and have carved it up in different ways. And so I agree with you that there's a lot of work to do, and that we have to get it right, even in the immediate steps. How the Overlook and the Alma Lewis Playhouse plans fit into the stadium plans, and the Grove, and the views, and the sightlines, and the Playstead, and how to make sure that this is a force for integrating and connecting the park rather than walling off different sections of it is really important to the team, to my team and our administration. And I will just say, in terms of some of the abutters impacts, I was kind of listening during the most recent IAG meeting on this as well. I hear loud and clear the requests for resident parking to be able to manage resident parking designations, to be able to manage some of what is anticipated. That is high on our list to make sure that we can make some decisions, plan ahead, and then work with community members to implement it so that it's a benefit for everyone, including those who live closest nearby.
David, thanks for the call.
Mayor, will you make an announcement today about nursing and emergency services career pathways? What's that about?
Yes, that'll be tomorrow. But we
tomorrow,
are. It's very exciting. We'll have more details to share tomorrow at 11. But this is a major partnership between the Edward M. Kennedy Academy for Health Careers and Mass General Brigham, bringing together a workforce pipeline, but more importantly, taking a huge step forward in modeling our commitment, our plan to ensure that every single high school student is college and career ready. So this will be integration and coordination unlike ever seen before here in the city with one of our major anchor institutions and employers in a very important field for the health and well-being of everyone in our community.
Tomorrow at 11, Jody, who is at the mic in the Newsfeed Cafe, you're on. You're talking to the mayor of the city of Boston. Welcome.
Well, thank you so much. It's an honor. It truly is. And I'm here for two reasons. One is an invitation, but one is also a question regarding a tragedy that occurred in my life. First of all, I'm part of Moms Demand Action. On the 27th, there is an event regarding unsolved homicides, and we would like to invite you to that. It will be in Roxbury, and we would love to see you there, and we think it's important because of our world and the gun violence in our world. I had a tragedy happen to me. My daughter, Olivia, 17 years old, a senior in high school, was shot by my husband and murdered. He shot me in my left temple where the bullet shattered my jaw, so every day I live in intense pain, emotionally and physically. Then he shot himself. So this event is for unsolved homicides, but my question is, gun violence and domestic violence are related, and the numbers are huge, yet we hear nothing about domestic violence. But yet every day we hear about gun violence in the city and in our state, let's face it. So my question to you is, what's being done? I've spoken in front of Congress. What's being done?
Jody, thanks.
Thank you so much for being here, for your example and your strength, and even in sharing your story. I'm sure there are countless people who feel a sense of comfort and being seen, and I know we are all just so sorry for what happened to your family, and want to do everything that we can to make sure that our community is one where situations like that don't have to cross the mind of anyone who's living in our city. You're absolutely exactly right that has to be the focus. When we talk about gun violence, we often use that as shorthand for certain subsets of violence that in fact are just one part of what adds up to the toll of trauma and lives taken and changed in our community. And domestic violence is a very significant piece of that. We track our numbers very carefully in Boston, and we have been marking progress in terms of downward trends. The last 2 years in a row have been the lowest levels of gun violence overall ever recorded in the city, starting from when real records were kept just a few decades ago. But we know that within the subsets of what all that gun violence represents, there's a lot more work to do. And so the organizations on the ground, there couldn't be better partners who are advocating for survivors, for safety, for representation among all the different segments of our community who really need to be a part of safety. Safety has to be something that is co-owned and shared, and our police department under Commissioner Michael Cox is really trying to live out every day, making the information available, being out in community, building the partnerships, learning and reflecting and iterating alongside our community members to how we can do even more every single day on how to stop, resolve, and ideally prevent all forms of violence in the city.
Jody, thank you, and Mayor, thank you. We only have a minute left, Mayor. Last night, Donald Trump won in a landslide in Iowa. Instead of going to New Hampshire like most candidates do, he went to a courtroom in New York City where he has already been found liable for sexual abuse against E. Jean Carroll. Today he's there on the first day of the trial for defaming her yet a second time. How worried are you? He's leading in virtually every poll in virtually every major state. We have a minute. How worried are you about the prospects come November?
We don't have a choice but to work as hard as we possibly can to try to explain what's at stake here. It's a moment in our political history, in our country's history, where it often feels like people are not talking to each other, and one set of information is just staying within a certain space and not even crossing any and overnight. Some of the interviews last night, for example, of why people are making their decisions, it's connected to a larger feeling of disillusionment and anxiety, and we know what happens. We know what is going to happen if it goes down that route. I'm going to be in New Hampshire on Saturday doing multiple events, rallying our volunteers from Boston and Massachusetts to try to help with a push there. We need people to talk to other people. It's not going to come from media headlines and changing people's minds through things that they read. It's only going to be from direct conversations. What is the experience? Under the Biden administration, we've gotten federal dollars to be able to transform so many aspects of what we do, from childcare to businesses to climate, and we need to make those connections much more visible and apparent to people.
Please join me in thanking Mayor Wu for once again being here for monthly Ask the Mayor. Mayor Wu, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mayor Wu, for
Appreciate
coming.
it.
We very much appreciate it.